Hey guys, Kelli Stewart here. I have a question for you guys that have been suffering from police worship. In our country, I think that we have a really big problem with police worship. And I think part of that problem comes from not enough people being willing to take responsibility for themselves. And so we've abdicated a lot of our roles to the police. And so as a result, we naturally worship police because they're doing the jobs that we don't want to do. In a nation like ours, of free people, we have the right to bear arms, we have the right to protect our property. You would think that before we worship the police, we would want to hold the police accountable. So I have a question for you guys. I was trying to think of an analogy that would help us understand because as a lot of you know, I have all kinds of people in my extended family, everything from military to the police force. And I love them too much to not ask them the hard questions. So I don't try to determine if they're a good police officer or if they're a good person in the military based on how I feel about them personally. I determine if they're a good police officer based on how they do their job. So I was thinking about a quote that Lavoie made the other day. Well, I was thinking about the quote the other day where he was talking about the BLM, and he said, the BLM is good to us here, but the question isn't, are they doing good? The question is, why do they have the power to do good? Because if they have the power to do good, then they have the power to do evil. So, comparing that to the issues that we're having right now in our nation with the police force. The police force is the front lines to carrying out treasonous acts and orders by our corrupt politicians. So while some of you want to relinquish the responsibility that should fall on the police, and you want to transfer that to the politicians putting the orders in place, I want to ask you this. If a police officer, actually here, let's do the analogy first. So everybody wants to say, Gavin, quit harassing police. There are good police out there. So if you go into a grocery store, and the man in front of you just robbed a bank, and the cashier tricks him and doesn't give him back, say, $90 of his change, and you're celebrating that, and you're like, good, I'm glad that she didn't give him back all of his change because that was stolen money. But then, my husband's getting back in the car now. We're out shopping. Today's our 17th wedding anniversary. So you're celebrating that person withholding that money because you're saying that that person had previously robbed a bank. And so you're like, oh good, she got away with that. She's a good cashier. But then it's your turn to come up and she shortchanges you the money because she looks at you and decides that there's something that she's not in supporting of who you are. And she now has the power to take your money. Do you guys understand that being a good cashier doesn't mean that she gets to use her judgment to decide when she gives somebody their rights and when she doesn't? And if you celebrate the fact that she took away the rights of the person in front of you because she kept his money and it was stolen money, then you're also celebrating her right to do that to you as well. Do you understand that? Can we now apply that to the police force? So when we celebrate a police officer shooting somebody because he thought the person was armed and there was no due process involved, there were no true orders that were put out to this individual to make sure that he understood the consequences at any minute he was going to be shot in the back. This just happened in Vancouver where a man stole a car, jumped out of the car, ran into somebody's house. The police did not know if he was armed. But when they saw him in the back bedroom where they went, broke into this house, they immediately shot him and killed him. And people celebrate that saying, well, he shouldn't have run. Do you understand how many people run from the police because they're truly in fear of their life and end up getting killed? And we're not the person that the police was actually after. Do you understand that every time you celebrate a police officer taking away somebody else's due process and rights, you're also giving them permission in the future to do that to you? So with this police worship that we're struggling with in our nation, again, going back to the beginning of this, I really believe that a lot of our problems with police worship is because we're abdicating our own responsibilities to protect our neighbors. And so we're willing to give up our responsibilities and our rights if it means we don't have to put our own necks on the line. So as far as the good police out there, are you willing, for those of you who are struggling with this issue of police worship, are you willing to sit down and think about a few things that are really important to you? Because our rights aren't here for when we are complying. We don't need any rights when we comply with our police force. Our rights are here to protect us when we are not in agreement. So the right to free speech is here to protect us. The right to petition your government for redress of grievance is there to protect you when you are going against or you feel your government has gone against you. That's the purpose of the right. So are you willing to sit down and think about a few rights that are important to you and start challenging some of these good police officers, right? You say there's good police officers. Well, we know there weren't good police officers at Waco, okay? We know there weren't good police officers in OSP where Lavoy was killed. I'm kind of talking to some of the patriot community and the people who are really hung up on this police worship issue. We know there were not good police officers, let's see, when Joshua Martinez was arrested, right? Can you go back and watch that video of them arresting him because he wouldn't give up his date of birth? Okay, so now we've said those police officers that took Joshua Martinez around the back of the building and punched him in the gut 5 times before they booked him. Can we agree that those weren't good police officers? I hope we can agree on that, right? Can we agree that a police officer who, let's see, pulls somebody over because they just stole something and mouthed off to the police. The police books them, sees cash sitting in the center console and takes it and justifies it because nobody's watching and the guy stole the money anyway. Can we agree that's not a good police officer? See, when you praise that police officer and say, I don't care what they took from that guy, he stole it anyway, you give them permission to steal from you. So I'm wondering if for the people who are really struggling with this police worship issue, if you are not willing to hold those police accountable to the same level you're willing to worship them, then you're nothing more than a coward. And you're really just worshiping these police because you don't want to take on the responsibilities that you have as an American to protect your life and your property and your family's lives and your family's property. And you want to abdicate that role. And when you abdicate your role to protect yourself, you're also giving up your rights. So are you willing to look at the Constitution and figure out a few things that you want protected? Are you willing to start challenging these good police? So again, if police don't uphold their oaths to the Constitution, just like the cashier who got to pick and choose who she gave back the change to, I'm not sure why we keep saying good. Why do we have to determine their character based on, or why do we determine if they're a good cashier or a good police officer based on what we know of their character? Why can't we just look at how they do their jobs? Is that so difficult? I know a lot of really nice police officers who are not good police officers. They're very, very nice people. But as far as a police officer goes, they're not good, because a good police officer is going to uphold his oath to the Constitution first, right? He's not going to take due process into his own hands. He's not going to punch Joshua Martinez around the corner. He's not going to fire shots at Lavoy Finicum when there isn't even a warrant to pull these people over. He isn't going to mistreat and abuse Dwayne Emmer and lie to him and tell them that he has a warrant for his arrest when he really doesn't. So I could just go through the whole list of us in our community of police officers who have not done a good job of being a police officer, that many people continue with this narrative of, but they're good people. You guys, we're not trying to decide if the cashier who took the person's money is a good mom or a good person. We're trying to figure out, does she know how to make correct change? If she doesn't know how to make correct change, she's not a good cashier. If she's going to pick and choose who gets correct change, she's not a good cashier. Okay, a good cashier is going to make correct change all the times and not allow her judgment to come in and cause her to forfeit her responsibilities in that job. So are you willing, back to my question, are you willing to study the Constitution Are you willing to think about areas you in the future might not want to comply with a law or a rule? And see in the Constitution where you're supposed to be protected, right? Whether it's telling a police officer, I'm not going to give you my date of birth. I'll tell you my name, but I don't need to give you my date of birth. I'm not required to in this state. Are you willing to take your Constitution and start going up to police officers and asking them, one, do you even know the Constitution? Because if they don't know the Constitution, they're not a good police officer. Police officers swear an oath that in their job, they will uphold the Constitution. If they don't know the Constitution, and that's the oath they swore, how can they be a good police officer if they don't even know what their restrictions are? How can they be a good police officer, guys? The really nice cop who helps the little kid across the street and helps the elderly woman who's broke down the side of the road. Is he a good police officer, or is he just a nice guy who's out being a nice guy? If he says to you, I don't know the Constitution, and if that little kid stepped on my toes, or that elderly woman hit me with her cane, I wouldn't know what her rights are. I wouldn't know where my line of authority ends and her line of liberty and protection begins. I wouldn't know because I don't know the Constitution. So the man who's a police officer and helps the old bad spot. So he's not a good police officer. It's okay to say these police officers, some of them are really nice guys. But again, if they don't know what the United States Constitution is and they don't know what your rights are, then they should scare the hell out of you. Even the nice ones should really scare you, because at what point are you not going to be saying or doing something that they want to hear, and are you going to become dependent on them knowing what the Constitution says and what your God-given rights are? It's going to happen. Eventually, it's going to happen to you. Okay, whether you're just simply saying like Josh Martinez did, I'm not going to give you my date of birth. I don't have to tell you that. I'm not under investigation for anything. And they turn to him and they say, well, then we'll arrest you and find out what your date of birth is. You guys, he had the right to not give up his date of birth. They didn't have the right to arrest them. These could be really, really nice guys. They could be great fathers. They could help little old ladies across lots of streets. But that doesn't make them good police officers if they're not upholding and honoring their oath to the United States Constitution. When you give somebody a badge and a gun and the free will to go out and do whatever they want without any accountability, you better make sure that these people know what the United States Constitution says. Otherwise, they have no limits. And all you're really doing is giving a gang permission to do whatever they want to you. So back to my challenge to all of you who really struggle from police worship. Find the good officers. Find the ones that you say, oh, this is a good officer, right? Probably not the person who has held Ryan Bundy and Ammon Bundy and all the guys in solitary. Probably not the people who abused Josh. Probably not the people who were at Waco. Probably not the people who were at the Oregon standoff or stand up, whatever you want to call it. Probably not any of the officers who didn't protect the Hammonds, right? Let's see. Probably not any of the people who didn't protect Randy Weaver. I mean, gosh, we could go through the list and it's going to get to the point where it's hard to find who you guys are talking about when you talk about these good police officers. But I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to assume that they are out there. I want you to find them. I want you to go to them, and I want finally back. So ask them if they know what the United States Constitution is. If they haven't studied it, if they don't know the Bill of Rights, if they don't understand the Founding Fathers' intent for a free people, then I want you to ask yourself, how can they be a good police officer? If a cashier can't count, I don't care how nice she is, she's not going to be a good cashier. I promise you. She could be sweet as pie. She might even be able to babysit my kids. But I'm not going to disrespect the title of a cashier by saying she's a good cashier if she doesn't know how to count. So when a police officer swears an oath to the United States Constitution, that must mean that it's a pretty big deal, that they understand what that oath is. So keep worshiping them if you want to, but please balance it out with accountability. and go to the next one you see this week and say, do you know what your limits of power are? Do you know what your limits of power are? And when they come, are you willing to submit to those limits? No matter how pissed off you are at the individual you're arresting, are you willing to submit to those limits? Do you know the United States Constitution? If you don't, you're a really nice person, but you cannot possibly be a good police officer. If it wasn't a big deal that these cops knew what the Constitution is, they wouldn't have to swear an oath to uphold it. Okay? They wouldn't have to swear an oath. It'd be no big deal. It'd be like, oh, that's an old document. We don't care about that anymore. If we don't care about it, why are they required to swear an oath that they'll uphold it? If they don't know what it is, they can't do their job. So that's my question for you guys. I would love to hear some responses. I'd love for you guys to get out of your house, off the computer, and start talking to some of these good police officers and find out how good they really are at doing their job. So get out there, get your job done, study your own Constitution, and, you know, for anybody who has to swear an oath to uphold something, you can find out if they know what they're doing by asking if they even know what that document is that they had to swear an oath to uphold. If they don't know what that document is, then there's no way they can possibly carry out that job and be considered good at what they do if they don't know what their limits and what their boundaries are that have been set by the people. So that's it. And in the meantime, get off your police worship and start doing your own job of protecting yourself and your neighbor. And maybe we can turn some of this around and start teaching the police that they're not the only ones with the power in this nation. That's it. God bless, guys.